Welcome to the SCOMA's preparing for the autumn 2021 census. And I want to emphasise this is about preparation for the autumn 2021 census. Those of you who've undertaken census returns before, there isn't much that's different, but there is one key element that is a change to this year's, and I will go into that in a little bit more detail. So without further ado, preparation. Census date is the 7th of October 2021. I just want to remind you that the census date is a snapshot of your school's data on that day. If for any reason you're not able to do the census return, running it on the 7th of October, and you can't revisit this until the 8th or even the week beginning the 11th, it will not be a problem because the census data within SIMS has been configured to ensure that it collects data based on the 7th of October. So the main thing there is don't panic. What we would recommend you do though is carry out some dry runs because that will enable you to fix any data that's incorrect before the 7th of October and will take some of the pressure off you. You do need to be on SIMS version 7.200 and all schools who are accessing SIMS the SCOMA's hosted platform don't need to worry about that particular requirement because it was done back in the summer. You may find though that there could be a last minute requirement for a file set ID to work out, correct any of the data. And again, schools on the SCOMA's hosted platform needn't worry about application of file set IDs because we will do that on your behalf. And as you can see, we did a workstation patch on the 17th of September. We then did a file set update on the 22nd of September, but there was one as recently as Monday of this week with ID 1903. We would hope there aren't going to be any more, but just in case, we would recommend that you look and check the SCOMA's bulletins on a regular basis. And the link is included on this presentation. You will require the permissions in System Manager of Returns Manager to complete the census returns. So if you're new to the role or you try to run this routine and it's grayed out, it would indicate to me that you haven't got access to run the return with the right permissions. So you would need to get whoever is your system manager in SIMS to, or who manages that area, to give you the responsibility of returns manager. And that's done in that route, system manager, manage groups, and returns manager just have to be added to that. What I would like to draw your attention to though is the need for privacy notices. And what you have to do there is remember that all new pupils and all new members of staff should receive a privacy notice to indicate why you're collecting data and what you're collecting and what you're going to do with it. Now, if you've got staff who've previously had that privacy notice issued to them and nothing has changed, you don't need to reissue, but it's definitely one you've got to do for new staff and new pupils. And I put on this slide the privacy notices recommendations from devon.gov.uk. It's very, very straightforward, and they've got templates on there. And it's a privacy notices are applicable to all schools, and the advice from Devon would support you irrespective of what local authority you're in. So that's the preparation. And remember, I've emphasised this is about preparation. It's also important that you know how to get your support from us, and I've included in the presentation details of the SCOMA service desk opening times and how to contact us via telephone, email, and the new customer portal. And that's all accessible from the website, but the link will take you straight to it. Now, in preparation, there are some really useful documents, and there's such a lot that you might think, what do I need to look at, review, read, check? So SCOMAs have actually put on their website on the bulletin area, where there's also frequently asked questions, the main documentation. So reading from the top, I think the validation and solutions is a really important document. It gives you all the census errors and queries with the numbers, and actually indicates what you should do to correct the data. So I would say that's my top list to review. Then we put on our website preparing for the school census and producing the school census. Now there's two elements. One's the preparation, which we're going to go through today, and then there's how to produce it on the day. I will show you at the end of the presentation a quick what you need to do to go in, but we're not going to produce the school census today because it's not the 7th of October. This now is the real new issue that you need to be aware of. So on the 2nd of September, the DfE announced the Education Recovery Package, and that is to enable pupils who are vulnerable to take advantage of something called the school-led tutoring grant. Now, the link is on this slide. It's the first time this data is being collected in the school census for 2021. You will have to bear in mind that this information will be collected in spring and in summer. You will have to think about how you're going to maintain the completion of the report that has now been placed into the tools area of SIMS. But it's about funding and monitoring and managing, recording where that money is being spent, and it's actually down to individual pupils. So remember, funding and monitoring is new. We only heard about it in September, early September, right when schools went back. So this slide shows you how to access the update funding and monitoring area. It's done through tools, statutory returns, and it's the third one in the list. So as you can see on there, we've also got update top-up funding, but this is another report that you're going to have to maintain. And it's very simple to do, and it's applicable to all pupils from the age of 5 up through 16 plus. And there is another area for year 13 returning to take additional lessons. So when you get into the update funding and monitoring, this is what it looks like, and it's quite simple. You select years 5 to 15 or 5 plus, and all you have to do then is put a tick in the box for the pupils who are receiving school-led funding, school-led tutoring, sorry. Literally just a tick in the box, but you are going to have to maintain this each term. This will obviously require some communication with member of staff or members of staff in your schools who will know who is being given school-led tutoring. You in the office school administration team may not have that information, so you're going to have to go and find out who has. The communication would have gone into the head teacher's mailbox back at the beginning of this month. It's quite simple. I'm not going to go through this in great detail. You've got the presentation, and the recording is just saying how to do this. So choosing age at 5 to 15, and you right click anywhere in the school-led tutoring columns. The other point I need to make on this is it's on our FAQs for the bulletin area of our website. So rather than read it through now, please go and visit our website under the school bulletins, FAQs, funding and monitoring. When you've when you put the data into the funding and monitoring area and you generate the census for the first time, it will produce a funding and monitoring report in the list of reports that are available in the census area. You can highlight all and copy and paste to Excel if you want to check through any of the information. But a point I want to make there is it can be maintained at any time during the academic year. And actually you're going to have to do that because you're going to have to report on it in the spring and in the summer, and it's based on individual students. The link to the FAQ on updating funding monitoring on our website is included on this slide. Cumulative hours are not required for the autumn 2021 census, but they will be collected from the spring. So you're going to have to record and update this information throughout the school academic year. How you need to record repeating year 13 is included in the link of the document on this slide. And for more information on the funding grants, you need to go to the link for school-led tutoring grant. It's one of 3 subsidised tutoring options that are available through the National Tutoring Programme. Just an add piece of information there. It's due to COVID-19 and it's for supporting disadvantaged and vulnerable pupils from year 1 to 11 to catch up on missed education. So preparing and producing the census, if we go back to the slide where there's important documentation, these are just examples of what the document front screens look like. So you've got preparing the school census for English primary, and there's also one for English secondary and the special schools. So those documents are included on our website. And then there is the documentation for producing the school census actually on the day or just after the day. Now, I'm a great one for checklists, and it really does help if you use the checklists to just tick off what you've done and where you've been. And you'd be pleased to know that from what I've told you already, that we can start to tick off the checklist. So the top one is that you need to have the right permissions. The second one is that you need to be on the summer release. The third one is that you need to make sure that you've got the right file set version. So we've just covered that one. And then item 4 is starting to carry out dry runs. And we would recommend that you do these dry runs because if you then encounter issues, give the support desk, the SCOMA support desk, a call and we can help you. And it's much easier for us to manage calls over a period of time than obviously if we have 850 schools ringing us on the day. So really recommend you trying out a dry run as soon as possible. Other things in the checklist, I'm just going to run through these for you, is that you need to check your school level information, and that is where you need to make sure you've got the right telephone number and the right email address, because if there's any issue with your return, that's where the information the DfE will access. So that's your school level information. You need to make sure that all leavers have been recorded. Has everybody who's left school been made a leaver, and that you have readmitted pupils in the correct manner. The next item is to delete any pupils recorded that have been created in error. Now, what I would say about this is just think about this one with a little bit of caution. Deleting a pupil does need to be considered, but it can happen if you put a pupil on manually, you then import a CTF file, and the CTF file is slightly different to the record, and you inadvertently create a new pupil record. And I took a call on our service desk last week where that actually happened, and we were able to permanently delete the pupil by checking that it was the correct entry that we wanted to remove. But I would just say, if you're in any doubt, please give the service desk a call and we will help you. Other areas that you need to be aware of is you need to check the pupil's basic details. So make sure they've got an address, they've got a parent and things like that. And check the pupil's registration details. Are they in the right class? Are they in the right year? checking their enrolment status, admissions date and border status, and check that they've got current UPNs. UPN, unique pupil number, is really important, and the census collection data will generate a failure if there are missing UPNs. So check that everyone's got a current UPN, and there are reports that you can run that will give you that information quite quickly. Applicable to special schools only is that they must have correct unique learner numbers. Moving into part-time pupils, so all part-time pupils information needs to be checked. Now, are the pupils in the correct national curriculum year? There are instances where a pupil might not be taught in the curriculum year that they are actually in. So a year 5 pupil, for example, might be really bright and clever, and he or she's been put into year 6 to be taught in, and that would generate a query, and you would have to just check and then make a note accordingly. Your free school meal eligibility is important, so that needs to be valid, and there are reports that you can run to do that. Check first language information, and your special education needs information needs to be correct. Exclusion information has to be reported in this census. It's not applicable to nursery schools. Your attendance data needs to be up to date, so I'd be making sure that I had no missing marks this week, for example, and keeping track of that next week. Need to class information for primary schools, so what type of class are they in, but it's only applicable to primary schools. And early years hours will have to be completed on this return. And finally, the one that we have mentioned today is update funding and monitoring details. So you've got a nice, easy check sheets, and these are in the documents that I've referenced previously. So now we will go and have a look at how the census looks in Sims in a moment, but here is the routine. It's done through routines, statutory returns, school census, and you then select new. The next thing you have to do is calculate all details, bearing in mind that this can take some time first time round, and I recommend that when your data starts to show on screen, it's really useful to take screenshots, because each time you run calculate all details, the information will change. So you might need to go back to put it back in again. So just be mindful of the fact that the data will change each time you calculate all details when you're doing your dry run. When I create a new census return for a dry run, I usually give it an extra notation, so it's test 1 or test 2, so that I'm not actually changing my final return. Run the reports that are available within the census return. They are really, really useful in helping you make sure that the return is complete. And remember, there's a really good report that you can even run now without running your census. It will extract data that you've got in Sims, and it's done through reports, school report. Select the option to do the full report and just check the screens that come through. So it's a really good report to have a look at. And before we go to have a look at the software, I just wanted to remind you that we've got free online digital census courses available. The link to access those is on this slide. As I say, they're free to customers who take support from SCOMIS, and they're a really good aid memoir for you. So not only would you have the preparation from this, but they will actually go through the producing the returns. So well worth having a look at. I'm now going to come out of the presentation and hopefully go into the software. So to run the statutory return, you go into routines, statutory returns, school census. Remember, if this is greyed out, that you haven't got the right permissions, and you need to get that amended by whoever's doing your system manager maintenance. School census, I'm going to create a new one. As you can see, my file set is out of date. My data haven't been updated. It should be 1903, but this training data haven't been updated. But that's where you would find that you've got the right file set. So I'm going to give it test 1. And as you can see, under school information, I've got no STD code here. So that would be really useful for the DFE. There's a telephone number, but no STD code. So really important that you check that. Calculate all details. It will take a few minutes. I'm using secondary data at the moment, so there are some things I will just gloss over because they're not relevant for primary, and that's where our training courses would be really helpful, because we've got one for primary and one for secondary. Primary schools won't get this screen about learning aims. Okay, you've got your top-up funding that you need to calculate. And now if I go to create and validate, I'm doing this because I want to bring up the error report just to show you how simple it is. And as I say, I'm not actually going to go into producing a return in any great detail. It tells me I've got attendant marks missing, but I want to create the return. Remember, you can create and validate as many times as you like. But you don't do the summary or authorizing until you're absolutely 100% sure that all your errors have been cleared, and any queries that you have got, you can give a notation for. So this is just going through the data. More primary schools, it may not take that long. And then we'll have a quick look at the detailed reports that you can obtain once this has been done. This is where I start singing to myself. And you're always pleased to see XML is being created because it's nearly completed it. These are the validation rules. So that then generates the validation errors summary. As I said, really important here, anything that fails, so in red, you have got to amend, correct? And it's useful to have a look. So we've got 4 pupils who've got their UPN missing. And the easiest way to do that is you can either click onto the pupils record here. And it takes you straight to the pupil record. This is where it has changed so much, so you don't have to think, oh, now what do I do? If you click on that one, it'll take you straight to the area that needs to be corrected. And as you can see, we've got no UPN here, so I'm just going to issue one. And then remember to save. And then if we go back to the census. Now at the moment that's still showing there because we would need to create and validate again. But the thing to note here is if you go down the report, you may find that you can actually get rid of a lot of errors in one go. Now, as I say, I'm looking at a secondary one. So, for example, here, we've got no entry date to school missing after the census date. So 1880 would need to be corrected, but you've got a number here. And just go back to that validation and errors report that I mentioned on the previous slide so that you can actually correct your entries. And then it's simply, when you've done your corrections, you have to create and validate again. I'm not going to do that because of trying to keep this presentation brief. I just want to show you the detailed reports. And as you can see, we've now got funding and monitoring appearing in the list, third from the bottom. But if you remember, I said you needed to check the basic details report. So once you've calculated, created and validated, then this will help you check all those areas that are on those checklists. And that really covers what we have to do in preparation. So remember, you need to have your permissions right. You need to make sure that you've got your checklists available, print out the validation and errors document, and have a manual to hand on how to produce the return on the day. And if you want a reminder on the funding and monitoring, our FAQ is on our website. So I will come out of this screen and go back to the presentation. And this is just really to remind you that our website has lots of information on it, www.scomus.org. And I've also included the link here from the DFE on how to produce the school census requirements. And finally, a little reminder, the school census takes place on the 7th of October, but you have until the 3rd of November to get the data into the DFE via Collect. So if you've got any issues, please don't panic. Give the SCOMUS service desk a call for any help. And if you are a local authority that shares your data with, or if you're a school in a local authority where you share the data, you'll need to check the date they require it, because that will be earlier than the 3rd of November. Hope you found this presentation useful, and all I would say is don't panic with your census. Give your support a call. The minute you think, I can't remember how to do this, or I'm not sure what to do, please give us a call. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful.